Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast. Thank you for listening.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you could do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now.
Hello. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast, the show where we look at geek culture through the spyglass of faith. This is episode number 63, and my name is still Matthew Seipel Anderson, and it's great to have you here listening to the show today. I'll be sharing my thoughts on the state of Star Wars, and it's my opinion that Star Wars is boldly going where Star Trek has already been, and it is saving the enterprise of Star Wars. Well, on a previous episode, in fact, the most recent episode, I shared about Star Trek Picard, and at the top of the show, I like to share, goofy stories, and I shared a story of an exploding whale. And now you're thinking, I've definitely got to go check that episode out. I agree, you totally should. Well, I found another story about a whale. This year, the beginning of the year, they actually found a dead whale in the Brazilian jungle. So crazy. And New York Times writer Matthew Haig, he wrote an article about it, and here's his opening paragraph. Marine biologists in Brazil were stunned to discover a young humpback whale on Friday that had washed ashore on a remote, forested island in the Amazon River at a time of year when it should have already migrated thousands of miles to Antarctica. So, pretty crazy story, pretty weird stuff going on in our world, in the whale world, I don't know. So apparently this young whale swam into the base of the Amazon River, and it was high tide, and the receding water dumped the body into a grove of mangrove trees. So you never know what you're going to find when you're on safari in the Amazon jungle. Well, speaking of things that you might find interesting, here's some news. So we got, hopefully our movie theaters will open back up and everyone will wear masks and take precautions and be safe. But as of right now, here are some entertainment dates. Friday, October 2nd, Wonder Woman 1984 is scheduled to come out. My wife is excited for that. Friday, November 6th, Black Widow. Friday, November 13th, Clifford the Big Red Dog. Can't forget Clifford. My kids were a huge fan. I kind of miss the days when my kids liked Clifford. Now they like more obnoxious cartoons. Anyway, Friday, December 18th, is Dune, which I don't know much about, but I am planning to learn more, so perhaps you'll hear more about Dune on this show, perhaps not. We shall see. All right, well, let's just blaze ahead into our feature content. Listen to this. Less than 40 theaters agreed to book showings of Star Wars after its release date was moved up before Memorial Day. The studio thought it would bomb in a crowded summer movie slate. Around the same time, 20th Century Fox is going to release an eagerly anticipated adaptation of a best-selling book called The Other Side of Midnight, which theaters were eager to show. Fox then stipulated that any theater showing The Other Side of Midnight must also show Star Wars, which inflated the number of screens for the movie. And of course, the Star Wars went on to become this mega worldwide phenomenon, and who's ever even heard of that other movie? I don't know. That little intro paragraph, that comes from an article on mentalfloss.com titled 65 Facts About the Star Wars Universe, written by Sean Hutchinson and Jennifer Wood. So you can check that out in the show notes as always. Where is Star Wars today? Star Wars became, like I said, a worldwide phenomenon, but where is it today? And how is Star Wars following in the footsteps of Star Trek? That's the assertion I made at the top of the show, and you might still be scratching your head over that. Well, I'm going to share just a few thoughts. As a Star Trek, Star Wars lover, I could just ramble on and on and on and on. And, sometime if you hang out with me around a fire and, get that party started, you can go down that road with me, and we can talk some serious Star Wars, Star Trek. But today is going to be pretty brief, but let me just dive into these thoughts here. So, how is Star Wars following in the footsteps of Star Trek? Here we go. To answer this question, I want to start by talking about the newest trilogy, because that's something I didn't really address. The new trilogy had wonderful, amazing actors playing strong characters. Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver, in my opinion, were fantastic. And so was the supporting cast, really. They were so good. Everyone just poured their heart and soul into these films. And the characters and performances are great. However, the story of the new trilogy is kind of like two 7-year-olds, and I happen to have a 7-year-old at my house. Two 7-year-olds. It's like a story that two 7-year-olds would make up while playing with their Star Wars toys. So, I just kind of like dreamed up this little dialogue, and it would go something like this. I threw your Emperor down a big hole and then blew up your Death Star. Oh yeah? I built another Death Star. You already built 2. I blew them both up. Well, this one's bigger and has coniferous trees growing on it. Okay, I'll send Han and Chewie to disable the shield while X-Wings fly in and blow it up again. Well, I don't care because the Emperor is back and he's back on his huge boomerang-shaped starship and he's awesome. Another Emperor? No, this is Supreme Leader Snoke. He's uglier and more powerful than my other Emperor. And his apprentice mask is way cooler than Darth Vader. Apprentice? Fine. His apprentice kills him. That's not fair. An apprentice killed my other Emperor. Well, it just happened. Again. Fine. My first Emperor, the original one, is back to life. His force lightning is crazy, and he has a secret planet with a weapon that can blow up a planet. Wait, no. He has like a zillion Death Star ships that can blow up like a zillion planets. Well, guess what? His apprentice goes rogue, and he dies, and his Death Star ships blow up. The end. So there you go. I just pretty much summarized the plot of the new Disney Star Wars trilogy that just came out. And here's the thing. People didn't love the prequels, right? The Star Wars prequels. However, the prequels had a great storyline. It's such a great story. In fact, it had too much story, way too much story for just 3 movies. And thankfully, George Lucas took his huge vision that he originally tried to cram into that trilogy, and he created the Clone Wars cartoon series. That series ushered in a new generation of fans and brought many old fans around to appreciating the prequel era of Star Wars, myself included. And this brings me to my point. Star Wars is moving towards the small screen, right? And that's a space where Star Trek has been cranking out content for decades. And this is how Star Wars is boldly going where Star Trek has already gone before, right? It's nothing short of the rebirth of Star Wars, right? Clone Wars was a hit. Rebels was a hit. The recently released final season of the Clone Wars was a smash hit. In fact, I'm just going to take a little deviation from my notes and say I enjoyed that last season, especially the last 4 episodes, way more than the new live-action trilogy that came out. That's just me, right? It got me, okay? And finally, The Mandalorian has disillusioned fans believing in live-action Star Wars again, right? Like, people are seeing that and going, wow, this is really cool. We really like it. We dig it. So the small screen is the perfect medium for a huge universe like Star Wars, right? If for no other reason, then there's more time to flesh out stories and characters. And honestly, it also lowers fan expectation, okay? Like, there's, look at Star Trek. There are literally a whole slew of terrible Trek episodes and movies. But honestly, fans are pretty forgiving. Why? Because the Star Trek train keeps on a-rolling, and we know that there's more stuff coming, and if some are, missed, we know there's going to be some that are going to hit. And so we just kind of roll with the punches. And I can't speak for everyone watching, but honestly, I find some of the bad Star Trek moments kind of endearing. Like, I love watching Patrick Stewart just deliver this horribly cheesy dialogue with utter conviction. And I love hearing Worf sing Klingon opera, right, with complete abandon. And watching like just awful fight scenes, right? Just the fight scenes are so bad, especially in the older Star Trek, okay? But it's enduring. We love it as fans. It's just kind of like part of what Star Trek is. Okay, so that's it. The new Star Wars trilogy was a letdown. But Disney is cranking out a lot of Star Wars content. In fact, they already have, and you may not even realize how much. There have been books and comics and kids shows that I haven't even mentioned here, YouTube shorts that you can go check out, and everything I mentioned earlier in the show, and there's so much more coming. In fact, I've read some things suggesting that Star Wars might also go where Marvel has gone before, and what that would mean is crafting a set of movies around characters and then over a long period of time weaving it all together into some crossover movies that build into a big climactic thing like the Infinity Gauntlet series. So who knows? I think the future of Star Wars is very bright, and I think they're, kind of catching their breath after this first, big set of movies, and they're going to build a really loyal fan base going forward on the small screen, just like Star Trek. Well, hey, this is the show where we look at geek culture through the spyglass of faith. So I think now it's time to
Bring forth the telescope.
disillusionment. A feeling of disappointment resulting from the discovery that something is not as good as one believed it to be. Yeah, that's the dictionary definition of disillusionment. Disillusionment is a theme that the recent Star Wars trilogy explored, right, through Luke Skywalker. It's also a major theme in Star Trek Picard, as Picard is wrestling with feeling disillusioned with the Federation. Now, I'm not sure if art is imitating life or life is imitating art. Likely the two are feeding each other, and it's building in some kind of crazy feedback loop. But disillusionment in the real world has just spilled out onto the streets in recent days, right? Peaceful protests have turned into violent protests, and violent protests have provoked more protests, and now there are counter-protests, and everyone is bringing weapons, and Lord help us. How can we rebuild our society when we are so disillusioned? Right? We're disillusioned with our major institutions. We're disillusioned with the government, with the banks, with our religious institutions, with our churches, with our military, even disillusioned with the idea of family in some cases, right? So what common ground do we have with our neighbors? It's a tough time that we live in spiritually. Culture has become so personalized and tailored that we don't have a lot of shared cultural values and stories, and really it's a huge mess. And everyone I feel like has a little bit of disillusionment on them right now. So I was thinking about this term, disillusionment, and how do I approach it? How do we approach it from a Christian point of view, right? So here are just a few of my thoughts. Number one, I think from a Christian point of view, you look at things and on some level you have to say, this world is not my home. The USA is not the kingdom of God, right? The kingdom of God is about people and individuals coming into relationship with God. It's not about this nation that we have here. Although we love our nation, we love our country. We have a great country. But, anyone who gets enough votes gets to run our country. And John Maxwell says it so well. He says, everything rises and falls on leadership. And that's not to be a particular slam on Trump. There's a lot of elected officials in our country, and we've been doing this thing for a couple hundred years. But what it means is, we shouldn't put our hope in the USA. The USA is now essentially a secular country that has a large Christian population. There is still a huge Christian influence in our country, but our country has changed drastically. As the population has changed, our nation has reflected that. And the Lord didn't commission the church to rule the nations, but to save souls. Jesus will someday rule the nations, but that's in the hands of our God. So that's the first thing, just as Christians, we need to see the limits of our hope in this world that we live in. Number two, there's never been a better time to highlight the message of Jesus. And I think that this is a great answer for disillusionment in our culture and the disillusionment that we see reflected in the art of our culture. Jesus was arrested on trumped-up charges. He was beat up before his trial. He was brought into custody by soldiers of a different race, right? By the Romans. He was a Jew. He was put through a sham trial, flogged, and ultimately executed in a way that directly, cut down his ethnicity. If you recall, a sign hung on the cross above Jesus' bloody and disfigured body that read, "This is the King of the Jews." It was a direct statement to all those Jews. This is what happens to anyone who claims to be your king. We're going to do this to them. We're going to dominate them. We're going to beat them. We're going to humiliate them. We're going to crush them. We're going to kill them in the most painful, brutal way that we know how to. And as if that's not enough, crucifixion usually results in death by asphyxiation. You suffocate to death on the cross. And you think about it in this story of Jesus in our current day context. You could literally say that while Jesus hung on the cross, he could have gasped, "I can't breathe." But ultimately, Jesus didn't die of suffocation. Jesus died from a broken heart. I think this is so poetic and so touching. When the soldiers, they showed up at the cross where Jesus was, and they broke the legs of the people who were crucified around him because they wanted them to die faster. So their legs would be broken, they could no longer push their bodies up to breathe, and they would just die fast. But when they came to Jesus, Jesus was already dead, and they were surprised. So they took a spear that they had, and they stabbed him in the side, and out came blood and water. And this is indicative of a condition called precardial effusion, and it's the result of the intense trauma Jesus experienced. It would have caused fluid to build up around his heart, and then as he became dehydrated from loss of blood and sweat and just the trauma that he experienced, and his tissues started to break down and water started to build up around his heart, and his blood would have become really sludgy, and eventually his heart would have just stopped. And that's how Jesus died. Jesus died of a broken heart for this world. Wow. If that isn't touching, I don't know what is. So, what do we do with disillusionment? Out in the world, we do what we can. We love. We forgive. We try to amend our laws. We rebuild our cities. We try to open doors for people that were never open for them before. We try to make the world a better place. We give. But those things will never be enough because greed and lawlessness and hate are not made in the USA products. They are the byproducts of a broken human heart. And so ultimately, I think the answer is we have to look to the one whose body and heart were broken for this world, because he's the one who can reconcile us, not just to one another, but ultimately to the God of love. And I just have to throw this last thought out. This is a thought I had today. We should be eternally grateful in this country. We should thank God every day in this country for the African American preachers who are just completely unsung heroes. Because I've thought many times, as you look across the world, you see all these feuds that have gone on for generations and even centuries. And that could have easily been our country. With the things that, were instituted in our country with slavery and how people were treated. And there could easily have been just nonstop fighting, civil war, and bloodshed. But there's this strong Christian thing in the African American community. And I really believe that, Jesus said that his people would be salt and light, his true people, right? Not people who claim to be Christians, but people who are truly seeking God and trying to, live out their lives like Jesus taught, would be salt and light in the world. And I truly believe that our country has been spared so much because of these preachers who taught the way of Christ, who taught to turn the other cheek, to love your neighbor, to forgive even when people didn't deserve forgiveness. And to go the extra mile, to when someone takes your cloak, give them your shirt also. Just these things that Jesus taught that are so simple but so profound. And I think they've spared our nation so much pain, but now things are starting to spill over as society becomes more secularized, and the pot's boiling over, and it's really sad. So hang in there, everybody. We have a great hope as you look to Jesus Christ as our example and as ultimately our eternal hope, because this world is not our home. So, all right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks so much for listening. I hope this was encouraging for you. Hop onto our Facebook page. It is the Telescope Podcast on Facebook, and I'll be posting some things, getting the discussion started on, for future episodes. And I want to thank everyone who chimed in for this episode. It was fun again. People sharing their thoughts. Some people are very, very strongly opinionated about what they like more, Star Trek or Star Wars. And I think, I mentioned that San Diego Comic-Con had put a lot of their panels online. I believe that they actually had a Star Wars versus Star Trek panel, kind of a fun rivalry type thing. So maybe that would be worth checking out. If I find it, I'll post that on the Facebook page as well. So, all right, take care. Love you all.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you could do a handstand.